Hello, gorgeous people. Whew. Right, welcome to my art block for today. If you give me 2 minutes to get myself set up, I will be with you properly. So, I need to get you guys up on my tablet so that I can actually see what's going on, and so I can keep up with all the gossip, all the stuff that we talk about, because without it, I'm going to be a bit boring. Right, I need to turn the volume down on it as well, because I don't really want to listen to myself. Hey, Debbie! Right, let's get this going. Well, it's being less temperamental than it was last time. This is good. So every time I come on, for some reason, my tablet always has a habit of being a bit temperamental. Hopefully it's all good for you guys. If it's not, let me know and I will sort things out. So I'm trying to reconnect. Oh, what a pain. Come on, you can reconnect. Oh well. Right. I am going to flip you guys around and we will get going. For those of you who don't already know, I'm Jenny. I am a mixed media artist, happiest when I'm up to my eyeballs in paint and, well, pretty much anything else. And, yeah, I make art. You having problems too, Vicky? Must just be one of those days. If anyone has problems, give us a shout, let me know, and I will try and keep up as much as I can. Let's see. I'll also stick my laptop on, because if I can get it on that as a connection as well, that'll make life a hell of a lot easier for us to keep up. Since my tablet, this is currently what I have on my tablet. A blurred picture. Yeah, that ain't going to work, is it? So, I'll get my laptop up. If you guys are having problems, shout up, let me know, and I'll do my best to just flick out and start up again. Whew, I think we're there. I think we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, I'll tip you guys around and pop you up, and I'll tell you all about the art block, or a bit more about the art block I should say, and what we're going to get up to today. So I need you guys up here first, because that's kind of the important bit. I'll get you guys in a position so that you can see what I am actually up to, and what I'm blithering on about today, which no one will be surprised, blithering being the operative word. Now, when I finish off today, if you want to see anything that we've been up to today... Oh, crikey, my tablet's caught up. Well done. So, when I get done today, you'll be able to find everything on the Facebook group. I'm just going to tilt you guys for a second, just so that we get, hopefully, the right way off on everything. There we go, it seems happy with that. Fabulous. You'll find everything out on the Facebook group. And, you know, we post pretty much everything that we do on the art block in there. So pop over, say hello, and see all the lovely shiny bits of art we've made today. If you want to find me, and I will reiterate this later on, come and join me at Inky Paws Art. If you pop over to my Facebook page and leave me a message, I can get back to you. Just whatever works for you guys, really. So, what have we got coming up next? Well, we're halfway through. Well, maybe not quite halfway through, but we'll have a look. So, if you want to screenshot it, this is what we have coming up today. So after me, we've got Tom, Marilyn, Carol. Oh, Marilyn's doing 2 slots today. Awesome. There you go. So, that's what we've got coming up today. And it's always worth a look in. So, I'm just going to pop you guys back up on Periscope and let that come back. Right. So, if you want anything, give me a shout. I will try and remember to talk through what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. If you've got any questions, holler. If I miss any questions, just keep shouting because I will get there in the end. I always do. Now, pop that to one side, hit that up there, and move things out of the way. Okay. So, I am working on this at the moment. Now, this particular piece is something I've had on the go for quite a while. Basically, what I've done, I've used lettuce stickers, so chipboard letters, and I've pushed them into a thick, heavy layer of modelling paste. So this is where it is at the moment. It's just had a coat of paint over it so that it's all white, and really it needs another, and then we can crack on with putting some colour and a bit more onto it. So first things first, I'm just going to grab my paint, and this I'm using a product called White Gesso, and gesso is just a preparation basically. Oh, get the lid off. It's a base. It provides something for your paint to hold on to, or whatever you put over it. So I just want to pop some straight onto my canvas because I don't really want to be painting everywhere, and it kind of just goes straight onto my canvas. I'm using a fairly stiff brush so that I can get into all the nooks and crannies on this, because with it being a thick, heavy layer of modelling paste, there's a lot of nooks and crannies here. I'm just going to use a sort of circular scrubbing motion just to get through that. Now, putting right the way over, as much paste as I can, and yeah, just coming to the edge there. And the amount I've got on there will cover everything. It's just a case of just going round, making sure I've got as much as I can. And it doesn't need to be a thick layer. This is just a coat, so that we're all on the same, so that, well, everything's on the same page. It doesn't have to be particularly even, doesn't have to be perfect, just needs the coat. Okay, and I will allow that some time to dry. So once that's dry, we'll be able to work on it a bit more. But that extra coat just allows a bit more scope for us to play around. It gives it a good grippy base as well, so if I want to use other paints on top of it, I'm not going to worry about things pulling up later. So just clean my brush off, because I'm going to want that later on. Okay, put things to one side. Now, for this, I want to actually put a photo in the middle of it, and that's where I just have to sit and go through a few things. So I want to put a photo of my cat in the middle of this one. So I'm just going to quickly go through for things that I could actually utilise. So I've got this little space here, and this is where I've put it. I'm just going to create a square, or, well, I'm going to find a photo that would fit in that square. So it is just a case of going through until I find a photo that would work. I mean, that would, but there's not a lot of texture. So, unfortunately, Metro is no longer with us, but I still have a shed load of photos of her, because she's a lovely, gorgeous little ball of fur. We live to bits. So I'm thinking, maybe that one. So, ones that I could use, I'm just going to pop to one side there. That could work. But I am going to cut them down a bit further, so that they are, well, I'm just going to use one actually. You could use a couple, it doesn't really matter particularly, so long as you have just a little bit of space there. That's all it needs. Okay. I think it's going to be one of those two, to be honest. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pop those away. Come back to here. So my space here is around about 3 by 3, possibly 4 by 4. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to use that one because it'll go with most things. So first thing I want to do is just cut this down. I'm going to cut it down to 4 by 4, just so that I can try my sizes. That's all I need to do. I've got a paper trimmer here, and 4 inches will take me into there, so I don't want to be quite that far in. And it's just measuring it up and taking off what you need to give you the space you want. Okay. This particular photo is actually 6 by 4, so I will be taking a little bit off it, but you know, it's not a problem. Okay. Now that's actually a bit too big, so we are going to go 3 by 3 here. So I'm going to take a little bit more off the other side, and I'm just going to keep going backwards and forwards between the two sides, until I have the space that I want. I'm much smaller than that there, really, can I? So yeah, 3 by 3 is definitely going to be the way to go here. So take a little bit off the top, and then we go on to the bottom, take a little bit off the bottom. Alright, so 3 is about there. Oh, brilliant. So that's my 3 by 3, and you can see that's going to fit in quite nicely there, or whichever way I choose to do it. And I do want to map this photo, so just to put something on the back so it's not going straight onto the canvas. And I've got an absolute ton of papers here. I'm just going to pull one out, see what I've got. See, it's a bit tricky until I've got something down, because I don't know quite what colours I'm going to use. I think what we'll do, we'll work on that first, and then we'll come back to what we're going to use. Okay, so this isn't quite dry from the gesso yet. If I lift it up, it's drying, but it isn't fully dry. So we are going to need to do a little bit of drying off, if I can find a heat gun for it. No, there it is. pull that out. Let's get drying. Just need to give it a quick blitz because I don't want to be working on wet gesso, just because if I'm working on wet gesso I'm going to start mixing that white into my colours, so I'll be making the colours paler, and that, in some cases that could be a good thing, but it's not where I want to head here. So certainly far from ideal on this one. Okay, nearly there. We're not going to be able to get everything totally dry, but we're going to have it at least touch dry so that I don't get covered in paint when I put my hand over it. Yeah, that should do it. Brilliant. Okay. So I want to get this in a way where my photo isn't going to look out of place, so I need to know which is my top and which is my bottom. So I'm going to start off with it like this, basically because she's looking that way. So I think having the bulk of the space down the bottom is the better way to go. And if I just lay the photo on there, you can see what I mean. It looks quite good in there. If I just turn it 90 degrees, it just doesn't look quite right. There's not the same flow to it. So we are going to go with it so that she's looking down, yeah, into this area here. So that's where the photo's going to go. Now, what I'm going to do next is add some paint, because, well, why wouldn't you add paint? Let's be honest. And I'm going to start off with this. It's a colour called Quinacridone Nickel Azo Gold. Oh, I need a new set of teeth today. I'm going to chuck this straight on my paper. On my canvas. And I'm going to go in a few blobs. I'm not going to have it everywhere, but just a few blobs here and there. I'm going to get a brush and I'm going to just move it around with this brush. It's not a thick layer, and it's quite a translucent paint, but it gives this gorgeous golden colour. I just love this colour so much. I'm just going to keep working it over, and I'll get some areas that are darker, I will get other areas that are much, much lighter, and areas where the paint just doesn't quite cover, other areas where the paint will cover. So I'm just going to work that around initially. Yeah. Just keep working that through. And this is going to provide just the initial first layer for the colours I'm going to add on top. And I don't really have much of a colour palette in mind beyond it just needs to work in. So I'm not starting with an idea of where it's going to head. I'm starting with colours that I like, colours that I enjoy playing with, and I'm going to see where it takes me. Because sometimes it takes you in really obscure places. And because some of this isn't dry, it started to fade out a bit, and that's okay. It just gives me a slightly different texture to go in there. Okay, so I haven't put a lot up here. I'm not going to. I'm going to come in with this yellow, and it's a Dryland yellow. There we are. I'm just going to do what I did before. Pop the drop in the top corner. And we'll get scrubbing with that. And I haven't cleaned my brush, so we're going to get it melting in, or the idea is to get it melting in to some of the colours down here, some of the Nickel Azo Gold. So let's keep scrubbing that over, and you can see where we're highlighting bits, where we're getting colour through, and if I add a little bit of water to it, you'll see that that starts to become more translucent and move further. And just a bit to the middle there, just so that it covered up pretty much everything. Okay, so I've got a lighter area at the top, a slightly darker one down the bottom, and there we are. And colours just moved around. Now I'm just going to come around the edge here with what's left on my brush, because I'm not too concerned about the edge, but I don't want it to be completely stark white. And I can just pick up paint from the areas that still have paint on them. And it's mainly going to be the yellow, which, you know, that's the colour that I was working with last, so that's the colour that's really still about on, there we go, on the layout. Okay. There we are. So that needs a bit of drying time again, and it will dry off quite quickly. It's not going to take long, but that's where I'm going to take it from. Hello Tom, how you doing today? Okay, so just a lovely couple of colours just to give us a base to work from. Now I'm going to dry this off again because I work in layers, and layers have to dry before you move on to your next layer. Otherwise you get everything blending together, and that's how you get mud, and we don't want mud. So I'm just quickly come in here, just quickly get this dried off. It won't take long because it's a really, really thin coat. Really, really thin coat of paint. Let's see. And because it's covered in gesso, hello lovely. Oh yeah, and because I covered it in gesso first, it means that it's not a porous surface, so I'm not going to get all the colour sinking in. It means that my colour and paints are going to stay on the top and look nice and vibrant. So I'll just get this particular brush dried out because I'm going to want that again later on. Okay. Now, this is my next bit. I have some spray inks. Now, I go through phases with spray inks, which ones I like and which ones I'm using at the time and all of that. These are the ones I'm currently quite engaged by. The texture on it, it's modelling paste, just modelling paste, and I've pushed in some chipboard letters into it, different types of chipboard letters, and let that dry, and that's what's given majority of the texture. So, there we are. I've got a few spray inks here. One is called Tea, which is this sort of dark, weird tea colour really, it's a tannin colour. I've got a lovely light yellow, I've got a coral, and I've got a peach. And these are slightly sparkly. Now, I'm not going to put them on just yet, because we're going to do a couple of other bits first, but they're one of the things I'm going to use. I also have these. Now, these are actually by a company called Prima, and these are actually rust pastes. And these mixed together create a rusty texture. Now, when you consider the colour that my cat was, she has this kind of rusty browns going throughout. She's a tortoise shell. So it's the kind of thing that works perfectly, but this rust paste actually adds texture too. So these are my little pots of it. They're not in the pots they're sold in, but so the product is a proper 3-part product by a company called Finnabair. So I'm just going to pop some on my brush. And there we go. In some of these areas, I'm going to build up a bit of dark brown. And this paste gives a little bit of extra texture to it. And I don't know if you can see it, but it does have some little beads almost. There you go. You can see things starting to flake off. So it's got a level of texture to it, which helps enhance this sort of rusted effect. I'm just going in with my brush. It's not saturated and wet. It is very much just a drier brush, which is why I dried it off before. And take off any paint I don't want, and then I'll go back and work in a bit further. Again, just dry brushing in, so I've got some of that dark paint in there, and pushing out, so we add that texture to it. Now, and that's why I wanted those base colours in first, so that I could come in with this and it not look like I've just come in with sudden blocks of brown. Now I am going to add another piece in, I think, just down here, because otherwise I've just got these 4 pieces and I don't like that. Don't like the idea of it. Now it's got quite a grit to it, so I can go in and just stipple in a bit. If I want it darker, I don't have to scrub, just stipple in. But where I want it darker, I have given it a bit of a scrub. Now there's 3 parts to this rust paste, so that's my initial one, which is the dark brown. Then I've got this mid-range sort of Indian red, and then this Indian yellow. And I love the texture too. I adore texture. I can't live without it really. Now this Indian red, again, I'm going to go in with a drier brush again, and I'm just going to stipple in. I don't want to really cover it because I do want some of that brown to come through, because that's what creates the rust effect in different areas. Now let's get that in. Yeah. I do love this stuff. I've developed a real obsession this last week. When I was away last weekend, we were playing around with this in one of the classes we did, and I just became slightly addicted. And it's one of these things that the more you do, the more addictive it becomes, and the more fun it starts to get to play around with. I've started to build up this a bit more, so that I've got a few bits of darker colour in there. There's a bit more texture to it, and I'm just going to build up these layers more and more with the colours until, ooh, and got plastic brushes. Oh crikey, that's not a good thing. Well, actually it might be, depending on whether you use plastic brushes. Plastic. Okay, I'm going to keep coming around and just working into the different areas. A bit more down there. Now we'll put a bit in here, just with this rusty red. Okay. I know I haven't put the brown layer under it, but I've got a yellow layer under it. I just want to have a play around and see how that works out when we put these around. Because I can always go over it with the Nickel Gold, and just going to give a little bit of extra texture. So put that to one side. Now, I haven't washed off my brush doing any of this. I've still got the paint on my brush. I'm going to go in with the yellow now. The thing is, if I wash off my brush in between each layer, I want some of these to blend together. I don't want them to be sort of standalone on their own. So we're going to have a little bit of this yellow now, just at the top. And this is going to start to blend in this mixture. So it starts to look rusted, antiqued. So I'm just working with a little bit at a time. I'm not going in for really heavy usage while I have there a bit, but I can blend that out a bit further. Come in, and it doesn't have to be covered, it doesn't have to be this seamless coverage. It wants to be a bit sporadic, because rusted things are sporadic. There's no nice, neat way things rust. Oh, I love colour over texture. I just love texture, full stop, to be honest. A bit more, I think. And then, and you know, when I'm doing stuff like this, it's fun to just go back in, back around and back over things. So with the last of this yellow, I'm just going to come in, and because I've got all this paint on my brush still, because I haven't because I haven't washed it off, I still have quite an array of colour there that I can just pull in to some of these areas. Now, I will leave it to dry off a bit, and then we'll come back, add some more, because you know that's how I roll. But I'm going to pop those to one side for a moment, just drop everything off. So I've got a bit of rust effect going on down here. It needs a bit more work. You know, nothing's over until it's over, and I just want to get rid of anything that is still trying to kick around. So what I'll do next, I'll be going back in with probably some of the brown and just sort of building up these layers a bit further. Now, whilst I'm doing that, let's get the brush off again so that it's not quite so saturated with colour, because you don't want it all saturated with colour. Okay. I'm going to go back in with some of that Nickel Gold that I went over with the first. So this lovely Nickel Gold. So I've gone for this sort of sunset colour scheme almost. It's not a plan I had in mind, but it seems to be working out okay. I'm going to go right over it this time. Just cover it completely. And I'll use my thicker brush because that'll give me the coverage I want. So just popped it down. And then we're just going to go in around the areas that are covered. Oh, that's lovely. And actually you can hear it. You can really hear the texture here. Can you hear that? It sounds so awesome. And actually it's bringing everything together quite nicely. Oh, I do like that. Ooh. I love it when a plan comes together. That was unexpected, but worth it. So, yeah. That's actually worked out really nicely. And because that rust paste is quite matte, you've got these layers of sort of shiny over these layers of matte over these layers. This is working out far better than I thought it was going to. See, this is my theory with things. You chuck the paint to the paper and you hope. If it doesn't go to plan, it doesn't go to plan. Yeah. If it goes according to some sort of plan, great. If it looks good, better. So I'm going to come back in with this dark brown rust again. Just dry off that brush a bit. Oh, I'm quite literally salivating at this. I love stuff like this. So obscenely passionate about things like this. Right. So I'm going to come back in with this dark brown. I'm stippling it on and just starting to stipple around the edges. I just want to darken up the patches that we've already got, really. I don't want to add any new patches if I can help it. I just want to make these ones darker. Now I've got a little bit area in here where I've got this divot, so I want to put a bit more of the paste into that, because in that divot is where you would get quite dark rust. It's not going to be light and airy fairy because, well, you know, it's just not. That's not the way these things work. So a bit more around the edge there and possibly a bit more there, and then we've got this lovely couple of areas here. So just keep going with them, keep working. And in areas you think it needs more, add a bit more. If you think it's going to look dark, add it. If you think it should look light, it's okay. Don't add it there. Just don't add it to the areas you don't want. And you can just stipple it on and stipple things out. You can also just scrub them in. I prefer with this to stipple at this point than to scrub, just because it gives you a bit more control over what's going where. And although I like quite an organic finish to it, I want it to look as though it's seen some sort of rust. So I'm going to come around the out here as well, I think. I'm going to start to come in a bit further than I had intended, just to see how it takes. You know, with all of this, if it doesn't work out, I can always cover it in white again. There's no harm in that. So I want to put a bit more of the texture in, so I'm just scraping off the texture that comes with this particular paste, just entering it in to some of those areas just to give me a bit more texture when I come to the next stage, because I like texture. It's a bit bigger than planned. Okay, 1, 2, 3. I've got 6 areas there. That wasn't planned. I like odd numbers more, so let's have a bit more. We'll go for, let's have this little corner down here. Actually, which way am I? Yeah, I'm that way. So that's my top right hand corner. And I'm going to come down into this corner here, I think. Just because I've got an absolute ton of space here. Just lightly go. There we go. Okay. Right. I pop the lid on that, and I'm going to dry this off now. Now, normally I'd come straight back in with that Indian red, but this time, because it's like my second or third layer, I'm going to come on with the Indian red once it's dry. So let us grab up the heat gun and let's get this dried off a bit. Right. And that's the thing, when you're working in layers, it is important to dry your layers. Otherwise you just create mud, and nobody likes mud. Mud is not a good look. Well, actually in this case I might actually say mud might be a good look, but generally speaking mud isn't a good look. Okay. Alright, so we're pretty much there. So we've got these lovely areas of texture, and I'm going to bring this up to the camera to see whether we can see it properly. So, there you go. You can see where I've got my original layers of paint, and these are a transparent, translucent finish. And then I've got my rust pastes, and you can see the texture on that sort of gritty, grainy texture that comes through. And that's what I'm looking for. It's a matte finish, so I've not just got the colour, I've got this sort of grainy texture to come on, and that is also mimicked within the red that we're going to use. Now, it's not completely dry, but it will dry as we go. So I'll give it another blast with the heat gun first, because I don't want to start moving this texture too much. If I start to move the texture too much, it's just going to defeat the object. So give it a quick blast again, just turn that round, because that's where I want to get to. And just in there. And it'll dry off fairly quickly, because I haven't put really heavy, thick layers in, but it just needs a little bit of time, a little bit of patience. Which, if you've seen me on before, I'm not the most patient on the planet. Okay. Right. that should do it. Now, just quickly get my brush out again. Get that cleaned off, because I don't want a wet brush for this. I do want to try and keep a stiffer and drier brush for this. Basically because it's not a spreading paint. You know, it's not something I want to just be able to move everywhere. I want this to be very rough and ready, and the thicker your bristles, the more your paint's going to spread. So we've now got this lovely rust red, which is, funnily enough, as it's rust paint. It's got the same sort of texture as your brown, and we just cover on. Now, because it's a very similar colour to the coat we've got below, it is going to start to blend in a bit, and that's the beauty of it. So I'm just stippling it on, and where you want the texture again is where you scrape on the texture. And where you don't want the texture, you just want the colour, you can just come in and stipple a bit. There we are, a bit around there. But you can see on these two pieces where it started to become more and more mottled, and you don't want to cover it up with the red. Okay, that's not the object. The object is to have a mottled effect, because rust is not just one colour. It's mottled. It's about 5 or 6 different reds, yellows and browns when you get down to it. So the more chance you can give it, more chance? What's the word I want? More texture I think you can give it doing it like this, the better. So I'll scrape a bit up there and just come in there. So I've got those 3 areas that I've done already, and we're just going to finish off the other areas now. Now, as this is also textured, you can scrape off areas that you want to keep the texture in, or you don't want to keep the texture in. It's really up to you how you do this, and there's no right or wrong way. That's the best bit. The whole point of these paints is to layer them up, and there's no wrong way to do it, because the point is for them to be textured. So if you miss a bit, that just adds to your texture. You cover an area completely, so long as you're adding to your texture, it's not really a problem. You know, just come in here a bit. I'm going to just use this and lighten it down. There we go. Because that bit doesn't need to be heavy for me. I've got quite a heavy area in there already. I'm just going to add a bit more because I'm awkward. Let's build it. And because this is a paste rather than a paint, you can build up texture quite readily with it because it's got all those bits in it. It's similar to a texture paste without actually being a true texture paste. So it makes it very interesting to work with. Okay, a few more areas and we'll be done. So I'm just going to add a splodge or 2. Now I need to just come down into here and start working with so much depth to the paint. And that's the only thing, is I am starting to get a bit more depth to that paint, and I really don't want too much depth. So pop that lid on. Right, we're on to the top coat of yellow here. So I want to dry this off because I don't want to merge everything in again. We've already done a bit of merging, we're just adding texture to it initially. So merging it in wasn't a problem, whereas now we're starting to get to those final layers. We don't necessarily want quite so much merging. We want bits to stick out, we want bits that are going to be slightly different. So, trusty heat gun, and let's get this dried off again. Just spin it round as I need. Just keep moving the heat gun, or keep moving the canvas, either way works. Drying things off is the way forward, and it stops everything becoming mud. There's times when you want mud, and there's times when you don't want mud, and this is one of the times I really don't want to have mud. So, what am I doing here? Some of this will already be dry because, you know, I've done it a little earlier. Some of it won't be yet dry, and it's just keeping it shifted around. There we are. So, pop that off. Now, once I can put my hand on it and not get colour up, is when I'm dry enough to work over. And that's the bit I'm looking for, so I'm just pressing down with my hand. I use my hands for pretty much everything when I paint, and I'll get my fingers in. Anyone who's seen me before, this is probably quite clean compared to normal. So, okay, I'm just going to take the paint out. And because it's a texture paste, you will get these little bits of grit in your bristles. and it is really important to try and get those out as you go. Easier said than done, but they do start to splay your bristles. They start to work their way up the bristle as you clean out. So the more you can get off, the better your paintbrush is going to be later on. And the less likely you are to have to ditch it. So I'm going in with this yellow. It's got a little grit to it, but nowhere near the level that those two have. So let us go for it. Now, bit of yellow, I'm just going to do exactly what I've been doing before. Put a bit down on my surface and stipple it out so that I've got quite a dry brush. And I'm just highlighting bits with it. I'm not trying to get into the nitty gritty. I am literally just trying to highlight little areas, because we're going to come in with another colour later on. Well, not another colour, but a similar colour later on. And we're going to have some of these that work in really well, but we want some of these to have some depth. We don't want them all to look the same. So, a bit over that red where I've got a very heavy red area, and less where I've got the brown areas. So down here I want to come over here, but not necessarily so much there, maybe a bit more up here. And the drier your brush, the easier this is to manage, because you're going to be able to get into those areas that you want to have the yellow on. And the drier the brush, the less likely you are to just smear everything everywhere. So it's not something you need to use thickly, this particular one. And you can sand things down, you can add the colours back over again if you wish to. I'm just going to come in over that with... You can rub it in so that you've got the matte finish, but not quite as heavily. Okay, come down here, a bit down there. Oh, I do like that around the art. The outside's looking pretty cool. A bit too heavy there, never mind. I'll bring that down here, a little bit there, a little bit around there. Okay, that's all I'm going to do with it. I've got these, it looks really strange when you're doing it, because it looks like this weird amalgamation of colours that shouldn't necessarily be there. But the more you work at it, the more it starts to come together as these areas of rust over these sort of less rusty areas, but the colours are the same, so it's like it's still starting to tarnish through. So I'm going to put my rust paste away for a bit. Oh, stretch out. Now, I'm just going to check my photo positioning again. So the idea is for my photo to come up here, and that's going to cover quite a heavy area, quite a good area there. So I've got all these pastes to play with, to mattify down if I want to, or to do whatever with. Thank you very much, Tess. So, next step, I have a lovely iridescent copper, and this one's by a company called Golden. I also have my spray inks that I had before. Now these are all metallic, and the benefit of them being metallic is I'm going to get these lovely different shades in. Now I've got this yellow here which I'm going to put to one side. I don't really want to add yellow to it, it's not going to do much for it. But the peaches and this tea stain colour will. So first things first, I'm going to shake them up, and I'm not going to spray with them. Okay, I'm going to undo them and I'm going to tap, because then you start to get these blobs rather than a focused spray. And a focused spray never looks as good as these blobs anyway. So this is how I tend to use spray inks. But because they're metallic, these are very, very good for highlighting different surfaces and just adding a bit of depth of colour to it. So you can't see necessarily so well, so I'll bring it up. But it sits on top without actually blending in, but you can see the slight sparkle to it. So it's just another layer, another pretty layer. So again, we'll go back in with that slightly deeper peachy red, and I've actually worked light to dark here, and there's method in my madness working light to dark, because your darker ones are going to hide a multitude of sins if you cock it up, or in my case when I cock it up is probably nearer the point. Right, but all of these colours are well suited to one another. And my colour scheme here isn't something I necessarily started out with, of an idea of having all these colours. It's just something that has progressed over time. Now, I've got this bigger bottle of, which is a tea stain colour, and that's going to fit in nicely with the rust because it's slightly tarnished, but not. It's almost like a rust tarnish before it turns to rust. Right, come on. I need to be able to get the lid off first, though. I don't really want to be spraying with it. I don't like spraying. I can't even get the lid off there. Yep. Oh, it'll go one day. There we go. Got it. Okay. Put that cap back on. So, that tea stain. There you go. That's the one. So it's this lovely, it's that pre-rust coppery finish that I'm going with. And I'm getting some big globules of it, holding it much closer than I might normally, just because that's what, it's going to work really well with this rust. And it's almost like that top layer of rust, which is what I was hoping for but wasn't sure. But yeah, that's worked pretty well. Okay, nearly there. That'll do. Okay. So once that's dry, I'm going to come in with that copper that we were talking about just before, so this one. But I need this to dry first. And you can see where the tea's sort of catching on the texture, that tea stain. It's catching in the texture of the rust paste and just adding another layer to it. I could just cover it with the tea, but I don't really want to. I do want those pops of colour through. I am going to take this big blob off though, because I don't like that very much. There we go. So, heat gun at the ready. Let's go. And I'm just going to dry off these so that they don't start to interfere with the next layers that we put on. It'll take a little while for these to dry, just because they are larger lumps of liquid on my page. And just keep turning it until there. And you can see it as it dries. You can see the movement of the liquid. It's really, really just a case of allowing these things to dry at this point. Giving the opportunity to just come out, stop, and work around. There you go. And what I could do is actually paint everything in this, but I'm not going to because I don't think it's going to help. But it is a really nice metallic, it's not even bronze, it just works with the rust so nicely, it's the right shade. Okay. Right, so I'm not going to get that much drier yet. It's not bad in terms of dryness. I've still got some globs around here that aren't dry. And that's okay, because they will start to merge in. So some areas that are dry, some areas that aren't. That's fine. Okay. So I was saying with this copper, which I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes and still haven't used. So what I'm going to do is just take that bit of plug out. I'm going to pop a little splash of copper just on there. Okay. Now it really isn't a lot, as you can see. It's just this tiny bit. It's less than the size of my fingernail. And I want to use my fingers for this. Okay. So I'm just stick my finger in, dab it off, and it's like dry brushing, but I'm going to use my fingers for it. I'm just going to come in and catch the top. I'm not going to try and rub it in. I just want to sort of catch the top around some of these areas where I've got a higher relief. That's it. Nothing technical. It's not difficult because you just run your finger over. So where it catches is where it's meant to be. And that includes over some of the rust areas because, you know, sometimes people have just gone back into the rust and polished it up. We've all seen it. Okay, here we are. And it doesn't have to be all over. You can use it in just some strategic points. There we go. So like around here There we are. Put it on there. So I've got it highlighting just a few areas, and that's all it needs. Just a little bit of highlight to look like somebody's maybe once upon a dream polished it. Not perfect by any stretch, but I don't do perfect. You know, perfectionism is overrated in my mind. Right, there we are. And that is my background. How pretty is that? I mean, I just love it. So I'm going to bring it up so you guys can see it properly now. Okay. So what we've got is these initial layers here that you can see. These initial colours, and they're a yellow and a sort of Indian red. Then I've got the rust pastes, and we'll bring it up to this one. Okay. So I've got that dark deep brown that you can see in here, that rusty red, and then that rusty yellow, that Indian yellow. Okay. And then we've got that copper, which I've just touched on to finish it off, and the splatterings, which you can see here, so like just in here, the splashes of mist, and they're just about dry and working really nicely. So I've got a layer of modelling paste on the bottom, which I have pushed these, basically I used a spatula and I've pushed chipboard letters into it, some leftover chipboard letters, and just left it to dry, and then I've gone on to create the colour layer. So next bit we're going to do is to get the kitty photo in there in our last few minutes, which is going to be interesting because I have neglected to pick up any glue, so this could get quite interesting. We'll see. Okay, so I've got this photo. Now if I just drop it on there, the colours are right, but it doesn't do anything for the photo. It doesn't do much. Okay, and hopefully I can get the glare off that a bit. Maybe. Yeah, that's a bit better. Bit of the glare off. So it needs something to just sit behind it. Now, I have a small stack of papers here next to me. So I know I'm looking for oranges. I'm going to pop this to one side across here, so that we're not just working into the papers. I'll just give that a quick brush off. So I'm just going to pop down a white sheet that I don't use for anything other than existence, and I'm going to start just shuffling through my papers. And because I've got my piece just up to the top here, just pull it on the screen, see whether I can get it so that you guys can actually see it. Okay, that's better. So because I've got this, I can see what the papers are going to look like next to it. So I'm just going to flick through them. They're double-sided, 12 by 12 papers, the kind you use for scrapbooking. And I'm just looking for something that's going to work with, you know, the rust. And I mean, I've got things like this craft which will work beautifully with it. So if I think it's going to work, I'm going to just pop it to one side. If I don't think it's going to work, then, you know, it'll go into the reject pile. So just quickly going to go through these. I do have quite a lot, but it helps me to run through things, to know that I have really given it consideration. That pink's awesome next to her, but not so much for that. I could cut this out and have these on as, like, these flowers on as separate pieces, but that's too much like hard work for me at the moment. So again, just keep running through. And sometimes you know something's not going to work, so you can just put that away. It's like that. Yeah, it's the right orange, but it's just going to be same old, same old. And I don't want it to be same old, same old. I want something that's going to help that photograph pop up and stand out. And sometimes you get too same old, same old. Whereas with this craft that we had out before, yes, it's the same colour theory, but it's just slightly, just not too orange, and it's not too close to these backgrounds. It's actually going to give, you can't see so well there, it's actually going to give a level of contrast, which is what we're looking for. That's much good. I've got these transparencies, they're not really much good for stuff like this, unfortunately. So, what does that look like? Me. I have better, I reckon. I think we're going to wind up back with that dark tan colour, but let's see. Green, yeah, not a fan. Pink, actually that pink could work out quite nicely. Not too many. No, I think I'm going to be going back to that tan by the end of it. So what else? Sorry, I'm just flicking through what I've got on my lap. It's funny because when you start to look for something that's got a bit of contrast, the things you think will work beautifully don't. Oh, that might. And you just start messing around with them until you find something that does work. And it's the best way to do it, is to just try these things out, put them together, put them side by side. You know, some of them won't work. One of them might, and if it doesn't, well, at least you'll have seen it next to each other, and you start to learn what does and doesn't work. And that's where you start to get your feel for colour theory. Yeah, I agree. The tan brings out the tan in the cat so nicely. And I think that's where I'm heading. I'm just coming down to the end of this pile now. And yeah, we're going to go with that tan because the others just aren't cutting it. Plain and simple. So put them to one side and we'll get my lovely cutting mat out again. So the photograph itself is actually 3x3. So I want to make this 3.5 by 3.5 just to make my life a bit easier. I'll be able to take a bit of space there, and then I'll have room to trim down further should I want to. Whereas if I take it down to just beyond 3x3 now, so like 3 and a bit, I'm not going to have as much space to play with. So here we go. I want that out again later on. So what I've got effectively is that, and that, and that. Now, then I get to choose how big I want that border or not. So that means that I don't have to worry so much about trimming down further and further because I know roughly where I want to go. Now, this is 3.5, so I'm going to take it down to 3.25. Just because I think 1/4 of an inch is going to be a better size all round for us. So I've got my square there, and then it's just a smaller strip all the way around. So move that off and out of the way. Let's bring our piece back here, and let's get the focus back. There we go. That's a bit better. Okay. So I have my glue just down here, and glue wise, I'm not all that fussy when it comes to stuff like this as to what I use. I'm not worried about it being acid free. The photos nowadays are fairly cheap, so because they are fairly cheap, it means that we tend to have quite a lot. We have so many sitting on our phones, so I'm not worried. I'm just using Pritt Stick, and that's to stick down the photo to the mount. And it's just a good glob. I don't worry about acid free. And if it becomes unstuck later, I can always reapply the glue. You know, for me, it's not about this finished piece staying together forever. It's about enjoying the process of making it. There we are. So roughly in the middle. I'm not a perfectionist. If it's not precise, I really don't care. To be honest, I really don't. And then we're going to adhere it here. Now, because we've got some depth to this, I can't just press it down flat because that's going to distort the picture. I want it to sit up. So you can use things like, you can get 3D foam dots. I don't actually have any for a change, so I am actually going to use some heavy body gel. Now, gel medium is basically what you get before you have acrylic paint. These are acrylic gels that are used as the base for acrylic paint. And you can get them in different viscosities, so you can get heavy, you can get fluid, you can get regular, you know, it's all much for muchness. But the heavy body will give you a more 3D effect. The softer the gel, the more fluid, the more pliable it is. But for something that's 3D, a heavy body gel will really, really help. So instead of having foam dots or pop dots, I've got this. Now I'm just going to put a big blob roughly in the centre of that area. Or at least I would do if I could get it out, because this tube is coming right to the end. So let's give this a good squish and see what we can get out of it. Okay. I'm just going to blob it into the middle as much as I can into the middle. It doesn't need huge amounts. Okay. There we go. It just needs enough to hide to get to that highest point. So I've got my blob in the middle there. It's as layered up as I can. I'm just going to pop this on top. Okay. Now, I'm not going to press it down. I'm just going to give it a quick pat so that it's held in place. So when I tip it, that's held in place. And once that gel has dried, that's going to be completely solid and it's not going to move. I could put some more gel under here just to hold it up. You don't have to, it's up to you. So what I've created is basically this little portrait of my little kitty, and it's just a nice little memento for me, a nice little keepsake. I could put a little sort of label down here with a title or something if you wanted to, but for me this is very much a way of playing around with products, playing around with paints, and finding different things that work or don't work for that matter, that I can try. And you know, worst case scenario, I've lost some paint and a photograph and a canvas. Wow, it's not a lot, and that's the thing, it's only paint. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's not the end of the world. So guys, I will make sure there is a photo of this once it's dry and I've got some better light, because it's now 8 o'clock here. So once I've got some better light, I'll get the photo for you and I'll get that up in the Facebook group. In the meantime, I know that Tom is up next, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the schedule up so you guys can all see it. So if you want to know where to head to next, Tom's up next, followed by Marilyn, and if you want to screenshot it, go ahead. Now is the time to do it. And just keep joining us and we'll keep painting. I don't know what Tom's doing today. He hasn't mentioned it. Usually he pops in and says so. However, he hasn't. Right, so before I leave you with the lovely Tom, I'm going to tell you where you can see this piece in all its glory at the end of it. End of the day. Well, it'll be the end of tomorrow actually, because tomorrow is when I'll have the light to take the photographs. So if you want to see it, pop over at the Facebook group. It's Little Deb's Creative Crew, so join in. If you're looking for us on the Saturday, we're all going to be here. You can find us on the hashtag, and if you look for LDCC, you'll find us there. If you want to see more of me, pop over to Inky Paws Art. I have lots of art going on. I have some healing classes coming up this next couple of months, so I've got a lot going on at the minute. So if you want to, pop over and see me, and I will see you there. So guys, we'll have a quick look at my finished piece again, just before we disappear off. So bring it up here so we can see it, so that we're slightly out of the light. You can see that that tan's really picked up the colour and just brought everything together. It doesn't just look like a photo matted down. There's a little bit of depth to it, but they all seem to be one cohesive piece. I've got this lovely copper which I've just brushed over, and that's really highlighted the relief. I've got this lovely tea stain which I've just splattered around, and that just adds another layer of texture and another layer of depth. This rust paste, I'm just going to turn this around so you can see it here. That rust paste has really worked out well, and it's that matte against the sheen of the others, so that has worked really nicely. And you know, the more you play with things, even on a smaller scale, the more you're going to learn about it. So just take you guys round and take you off tripod. So all that really remains is thank you very much for joining me today. It's been awesome to get to know you guys. It's lovely to see some old faces and some new. Am I here next week? I'm just trying to think what's next week. 8th. I should be about at some point next week for the art block. But for now, I'm going to hand you over to the lovely Tom, and I will see you later. So thank you. You're ugly too, darling. Thank you.